there. Welcome to Bible/Chat. Gus.
How are you, John?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
Good.
I have a question for you.
No, I'm asking you. This is my turn. Don't even try it. Don't try to steal my show. I'm just kidding. Okay, so we've been working through a few questions, and we had someone ask this question recently. Actually, the young adults group, someone asked this question.
Uh-oh.
So here's the question. So
it's either about dating,
no,
or no.
emotions.
No. Emotions.
They're great. But it's actually a really insightful question.
Yeah.
They were saying, if we know that God is our Father,
yeah,
and we know that God is in control of everything, He's sovereign, He loves us, then is it okay for a Christian to be depressed? Or even a better question would be, can a true Christian be depressed? Paul even said, I was sorrowful, but I was rejoicing. Yeah. So can a true Christian be depressed? That's the question we want to ask.
Well, I guess a question should be, and I'm speaking off the top of my head.
Oh, great!
I was not given a lot of
any kind of warning. We like these to be raw.
You want me to emote?
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect.
I think the question is, it's a very different question. As can or should.
Yeah. Right? Okay. That's good. That's a good distinction.
So that's the first distinction I would make. Yeah. Can, of course, I think that a lot of believers are depressed or would get depressed.
Or have struggled with depression.
Or struggle with depression.
Totally.
But I think that the question is, should you be depressed?
Yeah. Right.
And I think that sometimes you really, the reason why you're depressed could be you're in sin.
Yeah. Or
you're not thinking rightly.
Yeah.
Or perhaps there is some predisposition in your own body to be sad. I have a very good friend of mine who really has that predisposition of being sad. Usually it has to do with blood sugar. When he doesn't eat well, when he doesn't exercise, and that takes him into all sorts of problematic thinking.
Totally.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking of what 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 says about being always joyful, and then always thankful, and that whole heart that goes with it of just having joy in everything. And even what James 1 says, consider all joy when we go through trials. I think of that. Now, does that mean that I can never grieve? Right. I can't be sad.
No.
If a loved one dies, does that mean that I need to be like, well, I can grieve? I just be joyful. You need to grieve, right? I think there's, we see that even Christ cried, and even he was grieved.
Yeah, and Paul even says about his friend Epaphras, he says, if he had died, I would have had sorrow upon sorrow.
Exactly, and so I think that would be normal for us to express. That the issue is, what do we do with that sorrow? What do we do with that? Desperation, because sometimes you would feel desperate. Hey, this happened. I went through this situation. What do I do with that? Do I take it to the Lord? Do I take it to people around me so they can pray for me? Do I look for a spiritual answer to it, or do I just wallow in that sad situation or that horrible occurrence, because sometimes it's that something happened and you're thinking, why did it happen? Why am I going through this? Why do I have to do this? And I think that the word is the best place to go when you're sorrowful, when you're feeling sad, when sometimes you're feeling sad. I remember meeting with a guy some years ago, and he said to me, I'm really sad. And I thought he was going to tell me something happened, what happened? Who died? And he's like, oh, I don't know what happened. I'm just sad. I'm constantly sad.
Yeah, it's funny. I think William Cooper, the great hymn writer, he actually talked about a nameless, faceless sorrow that he had in his heart all the time. So that's helpful. So you would say a Christian can be depressed. That's a genuine thing. And then the question of can or should. Should a Christian be depressed? Well, that becomes definitional, right? Can a Christian grieve? Should a Christian grieve? Should a Christian be sorrowful? Or should a Christian weep? And we would say yes to all those things. In fact, we're commanded to weep with those who weep. But then you would say, at the same time, there should be, in some sense, that underlying sense of joy in Christ. We should have joy in Christ at all times, which would cause
even when you grieve,
even
because you know who is in control over everything. Totally. And you see that the psalmist, right? The psalmist is constantly shepherding himself, constantly talking to himself. Why are you sad? Why are you dangling? But at the same time, he knows. I mean, things are going terrible for him. Totally. I mean, his son wants to kill him.
Yeah.
Totally. His father-in-law wants to kill him.
Everyone wants to kill him.
And then all of a sudden, he's constantly thinking. I think of some. We can go there if you want. Psalm 34.
Sure.
One of my favorite psalms. I mean, David just lied. He shouldn't have lied. Obviously, he sinned against God, and because of this, you have something that Saul did. He basically killed a bunch of people and animals, and David is hiding in a cave. And then all of a sudden, he starts off saying, "I will bless the name of the Lord at all times. His praises shall continually be in my mouth." And then he said, like, "I sought the Lord and he answered me." I mean, he is like worshiping God. I mean, many people would have committed suicide if there were, some other people. I would have been, devastated. In bed for a week, and yet he's saying, like, look, this poor man, cried, verse 6, and the Lord heard him. I mean, he sees how God has been with him through this horrible situation. Totally. And then in verse 8, he's given testimony. "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. And sometimes we're used to seeing these verses and we take them out of context and we put them in a nice little plate. But I mean, the context is terrible. What David went through was horrible. Horrendous.
Well, it's funny because in verse 19 he says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous." So like he's suffering. And he's sad. He's crying out to God. He's grieved. I mean, all that stuff's actually happening inside of his heart. Sorrow and tons of, we would even call like depression. So much pain and trauma in his life. And yet he turns to God, cries out to God, and God hears him and answers him.
I think that the answer to all this is in chapter 4 when he says, verse 4 in chapter 34, he says, "I sought the Lord and he answered me." And I think you can be depressed. You can be in the dumps, if you want to call it that way. But seeking the Lord would always bring, the situation's not going to change. All these people were still dead. David was still in that cave. But God was with him. He answered him. We don't know how he answered him. Maybe giving him peace. Maybe, but I think that you see that in Psalm 63 as well. You see that David's going through a terrible time. His son is trying to kill him. And then he seeks the Lord and he wants God. And I think we've gone through that, right? When you go through something, you don't understand what's going on. And you're thinking, look, Lord, help me. I don't know what's going on. So help me. I'm sad right now. I feel hopeless. And I need you right now. And yet then you need to surround yourself with people who are going to remind you of truth. And they're not just going to say, you're right, everything's terrible.
Put the reality of the love of Christ in front of you.
Exactly.
What's interesting there, whether it's with the word or through prayer or through fellowship, all those things. And this maybe is for another video, because there is like advice for a person who's in a season of depression. But it is funny because sometimes that doesn't happen right away. Like I was reading Spurgeon and he said he had learned that his depression was, I think he called it like a king in beggar's clothes. Like he would feel so depressed and he would ask God to help him and he couldn't deal with it, and he was just so brokenhearted and wrestling with his heart, and he would pray and cry and weep, and he's like, "Lord, help me, help me, help me." And then he said, what after those seasons of depression, there was always some season of like extreme blessing. And it's like the Lord was humbling him in private in those moments, so that he was crying out to God, not hearing an answer in the immediacy of that, but then finding that God was using that to humble him, so that he was then going to receive this blessing of some ministerial thing. And again, not that always happens that way, but there is a season of time when there's just seeking God and begging him to help us. These Psalms, it's funny when you read the psalmist, this is a great psalm because we don't know the time frame between when he's depressed, afflicted, sad, weeping, to when he's rejoicing. Like, how long does that take? We have no idea. It doesn't tell us, It's just, we just know.
We do know what happened.
Yeah,
we know that someone came to him and told him everyone's dead in that town. I can only imagine what he thought. He was like, "It's all my fault. Obviously, I did this." Obviously, he did it. Sadly.
It's just so sad. Anyway, but that is, I think that's such a helpful way to think about it and to see David's heart. And again, we can talk more about like advice for those who are depressed, but I think it's very helpful just pastorally to be reminded, yes, a Christian can be depressed. A Christian can struggle with sorrow or even over an extended period of time. And then a Christian can appeal to God, can seek the Lord, and can turn to him and receive comfort in God's timing for those things. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much, man. So helpful. Yeah. Well, if you guys have any questions on this topic or any topic, feel free to reach out to us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks so much.